Chapter 1171. Why not him? He has the system now too. I can see it. Can others see it? The innkeeper asked. Carl nodded. Anyone with a system assigned class should be able to see his. But for some reason, yours is hidden. I think it's something to do with the backlash. But we don't know why that happened to you, but not to him. Maybe because I'm a demon, and he's an orc? The orcs follow any and every war and battle god they learn about, so one of them likely approves of him gaining power. That is a possibility. It looks like we just gained more questions than we answered. However, we can think about that later. Let's have a celebratory dinner first. If the silver is good here, then bring out the good rum, and we can celebrate properly. Carl offered and put a few coins on the table. The innkeeper scooped them up. We take foreign silver at weight. We can't expect everyone to use our clan's coins, after all. Most cities are like that. Is there no national currency? Dana asked. National currency? There aren't even reliable peace treaties between most villages, much less a unified currency. As long as your coins aren't shaved, you'll get a good price for them anywhere that you go. Carl sighed. So much has changed since I was here last. The innkeeper looked confused. How long has it been since you were here? I can't really tell your species' ages. Carl chuckled. It's been a few thousand years. Don't take it personally, there was some time traveling involved. But at the time, things were fairly well organized, and they even had patrols on all the major roads, hunting bandits. The demon laughed, drawing confused glances from the tired sailors and locals in the tavern. That really must have been a long time ago. We don't even say that there are bandits anymore. Just nomadic clans, which are the same thing. If you come across them, you either beat them into submission or you get robbed. The innkeeper explained. Dana sighed. We might have to fly. If you let the Carl pick fights with every group of nomadic orcs he comes across, we will never get anything done but drinking and fighting. Carl and the orcs were made for each other. An orc in the back of the room burst out laughing, and the mirth slowly spread around the room. That's why we like living in cities full of wrath demons. They just get us. You know? The orc joked. Carl chuckled and placed a few more coins on the table. Waitress, I think we need a party tonight. Let the house drink until those coins run out. The innkeeper chuckled as she pocketed one of the coins and put the other two into the safe behind the bar. It would take effort for the patrons to get through that much liquor, and it wasn't busy in here tonight. Plus, they had food coming. The tavern remained quiet for the evening, or at least the part of it that Carl and Dana were around for, because they only made it 3 drinks past dinner before he was carrying her up the stairs to their room. Do you know what I'm thinking? Carl asked as he kicked the door closed behind them. What? That you have entirely too many clothes on. Now, Carl had forgotten one essential factor before they were too distracted to worry about interference that evening. He was the one who was supposed to put up the soundproofing ward. So, when they went downstairs for breakfast in the morning, with Dana back in fox form, not a single patron of the inn, including the barmaid, could look them straight in the eye without blushing. Will you be staying for another night? The morning shift barmaid asked. Carl shook his head. No, we have business in Banga, so we will be heading out after breakfast. Give my compliments to the chef. This morning's bread is incredible. I hadn't expected to be so hungry, but I've got quite the appetite this morning. The waitress turned away, muttering something that sounded like "Goddess, give me strength," and Dana frowned at Carl in confusion. But whatever the waitress was on about wasn't enough to concern her. They were going to leave the city in just a few minutes, and she would convince Carl to transform back into a dragon so that they didn't have to walk the entire distance or ride a golem. They made their way through the streets after breakfast, as Carl didn't want to transform in the middle of town and freak everyone out. Hawk was circling overhead, napping as he floated on the air currents. Carl sent a mental poke to wake him up, and then transformed to let Dana hop on his back. Damn it, that's a big dragon, the gate guard muttered. You're not joking. Only something that scary could think that a cat demon transformation is a less threatening public face to put on. The demon on the other side of the gate agreed. Do you think that he might actually be totem ranked? I've never seen a dragon that size before. The first guard asked. At least totem. He smacked around the boss when he arrived, just for the sake of a good fight. No overlord is doing that. Freak them out a little. Dana joked as Carl prepared to leap into the air. Behemoth and brutality combined to nearly triple Carl's size, bringing his dragon form from just over 20 meters long to 60. Trees bowed under the force of the wind as he spread his wings and hurled his massive body into the air. Fortunately, Kara granted them agile flyer, or Carl was certain that a dragon this large would need half a country just to turn around at cruising speed. Once they were up above the clouds, Carl returned his size to normal and joined Hawk on their way east to Banga. First order of business? Find out what happened when he visited the abandoned guild house. Chapter 1172. Return to Banga. It was under 200 kilometers to Banga, not even 2 hours of flight time, even though they detoured once because Hawk thought that he saw giant mice, which turned out to be an oddly shaped species of sheep. Hawk returned to his space this time, and Carl landed within sight of the walls so that the guards could see him transform and escort Dana to the gates. The gate guards bowed politely as they approached, and motioned for them to place their hand on a round plinth. Please attempt to activate the plinth, and then place any weapons you are carrying into storage. The guard declared in the bored tone of wage workers everywhere. Dana put her blades into her inventory, then placed her hand on the plinth, and shrugged as nothing happened. Carl wasn't wearing anything but slacks and a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, so he just placed his hand on the plinth and inserted some mana. Welcome back, former city lord. The city functions initializing. Please wait. The guards were about to motion them into the city. Then they noticed the glowing words on the surface of the plinth. Former city lord? I think we need a supervisor. Definitely a supervisor. Maybe the captain. The captain will know what to do when something actually happens. The guard stammered. Dana silently stared at Carl, who only shrugged in response. How was I supposed to know that worn stone plinth was the city stone? It didn't look like that the last time I was here. At least, I'm pretty sure it didn't. But maybe we will get answers about what has gone wrong with the activations here. So, it's a win, right? He asked. A win for sure. Until the point where some mythic warrior with a grudge comes out with a sword in his hand. Dana reminded him. Part of the last time that happened was because you're just too sexy. Carl corrected. The Banga city guards stared at this odd couple. They were clearly powerful, but they might be a bit crazy. The monster man was definitely not normal. But that was common with ancient dragons. Carl wrapped an arm around Dana's waist and lifted her up to sit on his hip. The mage rolled her eyes at him and whispered in his ear. Do you think that it makes you look less threatening to have a cute fox in your arms? It can't hurt, right? The guards had a very different take on the situation. They weren't sure if the dragon in cat demon form considered the divine fox girl to be his wife or his pet. But the plinth called him a former city lord. But the plinth had been inactive for over 6,000 years. So he had to have been the city lord at some point before that. Also, it looked like they were both wearing demonic spider silk of overlord or higher quality. The guards could feel the magic radiating from the pair, and they weren't even casting any spells. It had to be entirely their outfits. Carl inspected the guards, who were wearing leather armor, and holding spears with sharpened bone tips. They were telling the truth in capture. These people really did only use products that used to be alive. There was no metal armor or weaponry to be found. A large orc rushed out of the gates, and then stopped when he saw Carl. I will be back. Then he turned and ran back into the city. The guards turned to each other, looking for answers, but nobody had any idea what was going on. Then, the guard captain came back out with a perplexed and terrified teen bunnykin on his hip, the same way that Carl was carrying Dana. Carl laughed. I must say, your choice is adorable, but I wasn't trying to start a contest. I just wanted to hold my wife while I waited. So, I can put the bunny down? The guard captain asked reluctantly. If you want to. The orc thought about it, then decided to keep the bunny. Might I ask, how did you activate the stone? He asked. I just placed my hand on it and gave it a bit of mana. Once upon a time, I was the city lord of Banga, and the stone remembered even after all this time. If I'm not mistaken, I've even got a guild house here in the city that is still partially intact. The Darklight Host Guild House. Carl replied, I don't know that name, but there are some ancient and haunted tombs. You might mean one of them. Why don't I lead you inside, and we can go see the Banga tribe's chieftain? The guard captain suggested. That works for me. Why don't we let the ladies walk together? Carl agreed. The guard captain nodded, and set the bunny down when Carl stepped beside him. Carl put Dana down, and she shrugged as the increasingly confused bunny took her hand. She was just the cleaner. She had no idea why she was dragged out of the barracks and presented to some strangers like a trophy. She had realized right away that the big guy and the fox were just flirting. But the guard captain wasn't a bright man. A great fighter, yes, but not a smart man, even for the notoriously brutish orcs. But now she was on an adventure with the pretty lady who smelled like magic and some sort of herbal soap. It was a good smell, and she wondered where she could get some. Dana brought out a bag of cookies as they followed the men through the city. So what is it like living in Banga? We came from another continent to investigate something for the Dragon Church. Dana asked quietly. Banga isn't bad. They treat bunnies better than most places. Banga is mostly trolls and orcs, but there are some beastkin as well. Not many powerful ones, but that's all right. Trolls are messy, though. It makes my job hard. The bunny explained. Dana chuckled and passed the bunny a cookie. This could take a while. We're almost at the Darklight Host Guild House, and the Carl is going to want to go inside and look around. That is never fast. As long as they don't add it to my cleaning rotation. That place gives me the creeps. Chapter 1173. Abandoned Guild House. Carl stepped up to the barrier around the dilapidated stone building and raised his hand to inspect the surface. It wasn't a barrier spell that he was familiar with, but it was most likely cast by Orthos before he left. The question was if Carl could enter without damaging it. The spell had held the house in something close to stasis for thousands of years, and Carl didn't want to do anything that would destroy the historical artifact. Even from here, he could see dwarven runes carved into the stone, long since inert, but undamaged by time. If he could spot some of the building's defensive measures already, there had to be more. And if there were more, most of them would be considered lost arts by now. At least by most people. Are you sure that's wise, sir? The Banga City guard asked cautiously as Carl's hand touched the barrier. No worries, the house still belongs to the guild. It won't harm me. I'm more worried about damaging it when I enter, if it was intended to be a stasis spell to preserve the house. So, I'm trying to determine what it does first. The guard nodded slowly as Carl analyzed the barrier, and then tried to use his limited understanding of the fundamental rule of mana manipulation to trace the spell to its origin. The spell stones were overgrown with grass, buried under a few centimeters of dirt and plant roots by the ages. But with mana flowing through them, they were easy enough to understand. It was a preservation spell, the same sort that he had cast on the pantry, though written by a mage and not a runecrafter, so the spell was somewhat different. That meant all it was doing was slowing the aging of the building and keeping unauthorized people out. That was a feature that the pantry didn't have, but he could see the value if he was making a copy for someone like Dave, who had a whole house full of curious badger children to keep away from snacks and cleaning supplies. There wasn't anyone in the Alliance house or guild house that wasn't allowed to access the food as they pleased. So Carl hadn't thought of it before seeing it in action. Tentatively, Carl took a step forward, and the barrier offered no resistance to him as he stepped onto the overgrown walkway and headed for the building. Dana followed him into the yard, but the guard simply ran into the barrier as if he had walked into a wall. Just wait there for a few moments, while we make sure that the building is safe to enter, Carl instructed, with no intentions of letting strangers into this relic of a house. That should be a preservation barrier, right? What happened to this place? Dana asked as she looked around the yard. If the spell functions the same as the one that I placed on the pantry, it only slows decay to 1% of its original rate. It doesn't stop it completely. That would be much more difficult without an affinity for time magic. So, a cake in the cupboard reaches day-old status after 3 months. But this place has been abandoned for thousands of years. Even with the barrier, it has essentially gone decades without maintenance. That's why the stones are all still perfect. But the yard is a mess and the paint has peeled. I don't know how well the building was made to begin with. I didn't really inspect it last time I was here. But it should be solid enough to enter. Carl explained. The front door was open, with another barrier over it to keep out both strangers and the elements, going by the leaves that had been piled against it by the wind. Carl stepped over them and into the house, which looked faded and dusty, but still intact. When the previous residents of the guild house had left, they had taken most of the furniture. Carl could see the spots along the wall where large pieces had once stood, and the divots in the floor where something on rollers, likely a grand piano, had once stood. But in the dining room, the massive ironwood table remained with one single chair and a carved stone tablet. To whomever should find this tablet. My name is Orthos, Bronze Dragon of the Order, last living member of the Darklight host in Banga, and one of the few to still have any system functions on this continent. If the house still stands, and the system resurgence has begun, please proceed to the basement and touch the guild stone to activate the branch house functions. If I still live, I should feel it. If the spells have failed, and the house is being visited by looters and not guild members, I ask that you not damage the relics left behind when you take them. In time, they will be immeasurably valuable. Destroying them for sport would deny your family the chance at unfathomable wealth in the next generation. Carl and Dana both smiled at the matter-of-fact message left by the Bronze Dragon. Should we go bother the old man? Carl asked. Oh, most definitely. If we didn't, I suspect that Kara would. Dana laughed. In her space, Kara nodded eagerly. She liked that dragon. He was fun to tease. Kara exited her space to lead the way down the stairs, following instinct to the guild stones. Guild branch leader Carl has reactivated the Darklight host guild branch at Banga. Branch members 1. Issue call to gather. Portal open. Carl sighed as he saw the list of system notices after Kara reached the system stones. The system letting her operate things on his behalf was somewhat problematic. Mostly just because Kara was Kara. If it was Thor who had learned that trick, Carl would have been much less concerned. What the hey? I was teaching a class. Where are you dragging me, you damnable badger? Don't think I forgot about the footprints on my ceiling. Orthos was complaining. It looks like you're still best friends. Dana laughed as she entered the open stone basement and found the dragon facing off against the Chaos Badger. Orthos glared at her, and Carl began to explain. Lady Matilda asked us to find out why nobody on this continent is getting the system, and this is where we started. We saw that the system still listed the house as belonging to the guild, but inactive. So, we reactivated it to see if the system started to come back online. Orthos tapped his chin. Did the old woman forget about the suppression? What suppression? Carl asked. Oh, at the end of the last resurgence, the Titans and Giants allied to cast a suppression barrier over the continent. It's supposed to prevent anyone from advancing, a magical device that the immortal realms use to keep slaves in line. That's the most likely cause for the situation here. Did you promise her that you would fix it, or just find out the reason for the issue? Orthos asked. Dana smirked and shook her head. Neither really. She insisted and then sent us here. You know how she is. Chapter 1174. Banga Guild Branch. Orthos sighed, then looked around the basement with a sense of nostalgia. Well, give me a moment to get my things and I will analyze the situation here. If nothing else, I should be able to pinpoint the origin of any curses, spells or other effects that are preventing the continent from regaining system access. Kara flapped her wings and flew back through the portal, making sure that the dragon wasn't going to run away on her. Making friends, are you? Carl asked as Kara followed Orthos around the beast god temple. Yep, he's so organized. It's like dangling candy in front of lotus or mice in front of hawk. I just can't resist messing with him. The badger agreed. Carl chuckled. Badgers and bronze dragons were polar opposites, order and chaos. It really wasn't surprising that the Chaos faction saw the disciples of the god of law and order as the perfect playmates. They were guaranteed a response to every prank. Only a few minutes later, the pair were back, and Kara let the portal close behind them. All right, where should we start? Let's begin with the suppression, as I can still feel it weighing on me. But it's not the same, just a similar effect to what was used before. The original suppression artifact was created and used by an immortal rank Titan. That Titan no longer exists. Matilda ate him. But the effect is still in place, so I suspect that either someone found the device that he used, or that another immortal managed to break through from their realm and put a restriction on the continent so they could harvest it later, without risking any of the residents outgrowing the roles it had chosen for them. Have you tried to assign classes to anyone? I heard you have a knack for that, Orthos asked. Carl nodded. 2 of them so far. The attempt to awaken a mage met with intense backlash that Kara had to nullify at the mythic rank multiple times. But the attempt to awaken a warrior didn't give us any trouble. Orthos tapped his chin as he thought, and tried to ignore the way that Kara twined between his feet like a cat. He would deal with the badger fur on his socks later. I get it. I know what the issue is. It's not targeting the system at all. If it was used by an immortal from this planet, they would have, as it's the greatest imbalance to the power structure. Instead of the system, it is suppressing magic, which is traditionally the only way that most species can reach immortality. I believe that one or more of the gateways between the realms have failed, or are being overpowered by something stronger than Matilda. The immortals on the other side either linked the gateway to one of their slave pens, or they are casting the spell through as a way to keep the mortals here weakened, so that they have time to deal with the problem later. The dragon insisted. So, we just need to find the source of the problem, and then close the gateway? Or deactivate the item that is causing the problem? Carl asked. Orthos nodded. If we stop the feed for the effect, it will begin to fade. It's not instant, the immortals solved that vulnerability eons ago. But without anything feeding the effect, it shouldn't be more than a few years before classes other than warrior start to awaken. Dana held up her hand. Wait, the Dragon Isles are massively overpopulated with warriors, especially in the northeast. Could that be related? Orthos thought about it, then shook his head. No, I think that's mostly just because the whole region is filled with brutish louts. The geography doesn't match. The southwestern islands are closest to this continent, so they should be the most affected if that was the case. But there is a possibility that the whole world is suffering from it to some degree, especially if the user on the other side is a legend or a demigod. He informed them with a sigh. What are the chances that we can actually do something about it? Carl asked. Very good. Matilda hasn't let an intruder onto this world in ages. If she's blocked the weak point, the 4 of us should be enough to completely seal it. I don't think that an immortal would put an item that valuable in our world, but if they did, that would be even easier. You see, I know the trick to opening portals between planes, and we could just make it someone else's problem. Orthos explained. Kara gave him 2 thumbs up, and the dragon immediately began to work on another plan. The plan that the Chaos Badger approved of would be Plan B. Now that the guild house is back online, would you like to take a look around? Or should we go straight to problem solving? Dana asked. Orthos waved his hand dismissively. I have all the time in the world to sort out this mess. Plus, there are no other guild members here, and I likely can't recruit them until years from now when they actually have a system interface. So, we can solve the issue now, and then I will come back and deal with guild matters. Matilda is already sending me welcome back messages. That made Dana giggle. It was no secret that Orthos was one of the few dragons old enough to relate to her in some way. But Matilda's daily activity rate had gone way up from her usual slumbering state once the Drad Guild branch had been activated, and even more in the last few weeks with the wedding plans. Soon, the supreme-ranked Chaos Dragon wouldn't be known as a hibernating threat, but as an active participant in the life of the Dragon Isles. Before we leave the city, we should likely trim the yard and say hello to the current lord. Who even leads this place nowadays? Orthos asked. The Banga clan does. The continent has somehow managed to devolve into disassociated barbarian clans running cities, or living nomadic lives in the wilderness. Carl explained. Orthos sighed. Are the city stones at least still active? The air here smells terrible, and not in the stale pantry way. Dana giggled and Carl smiled. In fact, they are. They placed the plinth at the main gate to help vet visitors. You can check in and bring whatever functions you would like online. I can offer you some mana storage if you need it, in place of the guild members who would normally help. That would be much appreciated. I can't stand a disorganized city. Chapter 1175. Welcome home, Orthos. When they walked out of the house with one more person, the city guard was completely baffled. Had there been someone living in there this whole time? But the house was beginning to repair itself, and magical blades were trimming the yard and moving the mulch to a compost pile. If this new person had lived here the entire time, he would have done that more than once in the last 1,000 years, right? Carl nodded at the guard. We need to go back to the gate for a moment. Our new arrival needs to activate the city stones. Oh, certainly. It's not far. Please follow me. It was easier not to argue with Carl, and it was city policy that everyone checked in by touching the stones. Kara nearly tripped Orthos a dozen times as she ran in circles around the group, becoming increasingly excited with every step. Why did the stone have to be so far from the house? This was going to be glorious. Orthos didn't understand her enthusiasm. If he activated the city stones, he would bring order to the city, not chaos. The guard led them to the gates, and Orthos sighed as he saw the damaged and worn state of the city stone. Welcome, City Lord Orthos. City functions now online. Ending hibernation mode. All functions operational. The heavily worn plinth regrew atop platform, covered in gems and writing, and Orthos nodded happily. Ah, that is better. Now, Lord Carl, could you spare me just a bit of mana to bring essential services online? Orthos asked. Carl nodded, and placed a hand on the bronze dragon's shoulder to pass mana directly to him. Orthos radiated power as he began to work, and a barrier formed over the whole city. Then, it began sending pillars of light toward the ground all over Banga, as the mana draw reached the maximum constant mana flow for an overlord-ranked dragon. At the end of the road in front of them, right in the middle of the city, the ruins of the city hall began to rebuild themselves, and Carl saw golems or perhaps gargoyles in police uniforms appearing all over the concourse. Don't forget to match the new fashion sensibility. They only wear and use things that were living, no metal. Carl reminded the dragon with a system message. Orthos nodded, and the guards changed from polished brass buttons on military coats to burly dragonkin warriors in leather pants, with scales and tattoos on bare chests. Dana gave the dragon a curious look and he shrugged. They're still impressive, right? If I can't have the cool ones, I will at least make the ones the ladies like. He wasn't joking. He had made hundreds of overlord-ranked security guard gargoyles, with magical stone battle axes, and the ladies of Banga were already ogling them as they introduced themselves and handed out flyers with basic city rules on them. Do you think that we should wait here for the clan chief? Or should we go to him? Carl asked the stunned security guards as Orthos continued to work. I'm not sure. I think if we wait here, the clan chief will come to us. There is no way that he can miss that giant stone building appearing in the park, especially since it's in his back garden. But I will send someone to tell him what is going on. What else is he planning to do? The guard replied. Orthos shrugged. I remade the city guard, I made new sanitation wagons, and I refreshed the self-repair charm on the city walls after I rebuilt the city hall. Other than that, I left things as they were. The guards aren't setting any new rules right now, just handing out flyers with information about what rules they will enforce. The guards winced. That was definitely not going to make the clan chief happy. His enforcers set the rules based on their mood, and most of them were not overlords. The runner from the guard station at the wall didn't have to make it all the way to the center of the city. The clan chief was already coming their way in full battle armor with a retinue of guards. Looks like you're about to gain new responsibilities, Carl joked with Orthos. Old ones, really, but as a bronze dragon, I can't just let them continue going on like savages. He sighed. Then, his aura pulsed with power, and Carl realized that the dragon was advancing. He had been overlord for a long time, bottlenecked by the restricted energy levels of the other continent. But here, that wasn't a problem, and he had just done something that greatly pleased his god. "Guard, explain," the clan chief shouted as he reached the gates. "Sir, the dragons of the Darklight host have returned, and they activated the plinth. This is former City Lord Carl and City Lord Orthos." The guard informed him. "What is he doing to my city?" the clan chief demanded. Orthos sighed in relief as he finished all of what he considered the basic work around the city. "I brought back the necessities of a basic and functional society. How did you manage to let the city degrade so far that not even the running water was functional anymore? No, forget that. How did you let things get so bad that people were dumping their household waste in the gutters? That's just uncivilized. So, I fixed the basic services, and over the next week the city will undergo a thorough cleansing. I do have a few things to take care of, but I am not sure that you can be trusted to not screw it all up in my absence," Orthos explained. The worst part was that he didn't even see it as an insult, just basic questions and a statement of fact. The beast god temples were full of what the people here would consider wild animals, and they were still more sanitary than the people of the Banga clan. Chapter 1176. Does not compute. For a moment, the clan chief didn't seem to know what to say. He had been insulted many ways by many different people, but the pure audacity of this dragon to tell him that his people lived like savages, when wild dragons roamed the continent, killing and burning as they pleased, was beyond words. "What rules are you trying to enforce on my clan?" the chief demanded, losing patience with Orthos. The bronze dragon sighed. "Just the essentials of civilized society, as I see that your clan has devolved somewhat since I departed a few thousand years ago. My guards will enforce the laws against theft and prevent violence against others wherever they see it. That is all, for now. However, there are other aspects of the city that will require attention and maintenance. For example, I fixed the running water situation, but I see that none of the new homes have been built with access to the lines. At least the public fountains are flowing now. Also, the sewer lines are repaired, so liquid waste dumped in the street like primitives discovering a lost civilization will flow out of the city. I will have the sanitation wagons clear the solid debris from the street to be disposed of in the incinerator. We can discuss educating the people about the newly placed rubbish bins later. This whole place needs cleaning, so I will return here once we have discovered the source of the disturbance that is limiting the system's activation and resume my role as city lord." The clan chief roared and charged at Orthos with a spiked club in his hand, but the bronze dragon simply transformed and stomped on him, smashing the man into the ground as he glowed with divine light. Dealing with lawbreakers and troublemakers was the domain of his god, and Orthos was not going to lose a challenge for his city before he even had a chance to clean it or restore order and the rule of law. The clan chief looked baffled as he flailed under Orthos' claw. He had been defeated with a single strike, and the dragon didn't even have to try to keep him pinned down. Was this the physical advantage between dragons and the rest of the world? Perhaps we should continue the search on our own? Your city has a lot of renovations to do, and the Banga Guild House probably needs a good cleaning before you start to recruit new members. It's been a few thousand years since the Darklight host last ruled the city of Banga, and they do look like they could use a bit of guidance," Carl suggested. Orthos rumbled in annoyance, then nodded and dropped an item from his inventory at Carl's feet. "You can use that to find anomalies. One of them must be the source of the problem, so just follow the disruption toward its strongest point, then use that to pinpoint the issue. But you should at least rest here for one night first. It's still early, but there are no other cities in easy walking distance." "Or were you planning to fly?" Orthos asked. "I was going to fly, but an overnight stay doesn't seem too bad. Why don't you start on educating the clan chief about his responsibilities while I inform the people of the changes that have been made?" Carl suggested. Orthos transformed back into the unassuming old cleric he had arrived looking like, and then picked up the Banga clan chief. "Now let's head for City Hall, and I can fill you in on some of the changes that will be happening here. I am not interested in replacing the Banga clan, only in keeping order within the city." "Oh, don't look at me like that. Have you ever seen a feral bronze dragon? No, it doesn't happen to us. Now get to walking. I have a schedule to keep," Orthos lectured the sullen clan chief. As they walked away, the gate guard turned to Carl. Is he always like that? Carl shook his head. No, he just has zero patience for stupidity and disorder. He spent over 1,000 years educating preschool-age divine beasts, and I suspect that he views the people of Banga as being at about the same level of civility. But I might as well start my work here. Can you call out all the guards in this zone? I will explain the changes now so that you don't anger Orthos and make him call for assistance from the church. That would be the beast god's church, most likely. And being lectured in basic civility by a bunch of intelligent beasts probably wouldn't improve the mood of any of the residents of the city. The guard who had been manning the plinth blew a series of notes on a whistle hung around his neck, and the guards began to gather. The man nodded, then went to lean on the plinth and almost fell over when he realized it wasn't there anymore. Orthos must have put it back in the control room in City Hall. That would be the rebuilt building in the middle of the city. But we will start with the essentials. The defenses of the city have been partially restored, so you will be safer from outside attacks. The ancient fountains in the city have all been reconstructed, and they flow with fresh, drinkable water. That water will continue to flow for as long as Orthos is in control of the city. The street drains and the septic lines in any relic houses are now repaired, so waste will flow out of the city. The newly constructed city guard will maintain order, but Orthos has limited their enforcement so that they're not too busy. I will say that he doesn't have high expectations for the Banga clan, but after seeing the conditions in capture, I can assure you that there will be some adjustments to be made. Now, who has questions? Carl explained to the gathered guards. An elderly wrath demon stepped forward to speak. I have a few. Is it true that the new guards don't allow fighting? Carl immediately understood the issue. Not as a blanket ban on violence. They will only stop violent crime and attacks. If you both want to fight, that is fine. But if you sucker punch someone who doesn't want to fight or try to rob them, then they will get involved. The demon smiled in satisfaction. At least the new changes wouldn't change the dominance fights. But one of the orcs had a more practical concern. What happens when traveling merchants come through with slave caravans? That was definitely not going to end well. Chapter 1177. That might be an issue. That was an excellent question. What would happen if someone brought slaves into the city? The practice had been outlawed the last time that Carl had been here, and the city had sent out guards to hunt the pirates who were still capturing slaves for export. I would recommend that they not come into the city. During the last system resurgence, the practice had been outlawed. If they show up, I can't guarantee that the city guard won't free any slave that requests it. Carl explained. The orc chuckled. Oh, this is going to be fun. Banga clan doesn't allow slaves in the city, but the chief lets you buy from the caravans as long as you free them after you pay. They capture many children from the nomadic tribes, and some make good fighters. A sturdy troll beside him, with skin like drying mud, cracked and mottled, rumbled happily. Maybe the new city lord will let us hunt slavers? They taste good. Dana laughed and Carl nodded. You should discuss that with the clan chief. I know that Orthos would let you, but his job is more to provide the rules that keep the city running, while the clan chief sets the rules for his tribesmen. The troll nodded. I will inform the other trolls. Swamp trolls like the taste of merchants best, but some of the others don't like what they do. Big demons and orcs will come with us, for sure. Any chance to smash thieves? The orcs in the crowd simply shrugged. The troll might not be a bright man, but he knew what he was talking about. They did love a good fight, and it wasn't a stretch to consider captured nomads as stolen goods. So, we don't need to start doing anything new, only keeping the city in order and explaining the new features to people so they don't make a mess? A lanky, blue-skinned troll asked. Carl nodded. Exactly. Until the big bosses give different orders, all you have to do is keep the city in order. Don't let the brawls break vendor stalls or houses. Teach everyone not to make the city more filthy than it has to be. It will also help reduce disease in the city. Not that trolls usually have to worry about that with your regeneration, but for everyone else that is a good thing. Also, Orthos can heal, so he might set up some sort of hospital. The guards looked lost. A hospital is a place where healers gather, so that everyone knows where to find them. Now they understood. Civilizing these people up to an acceptable standard was going to drive orthos insane. Carl was certain of it. But he could probably make a few changes that would improve the city for everyone. For example, healing totem runes engraved on the public fountains would affect everyone who came for a drink or for water to bring home. That would be an immediate improvement, and it wasn't hard to make them self-powered. I will take my wife and go spread the word through the city, while I make a few upgrades. Did you need anything else to do your jobs? Carl asked. The guards shook their heads, and Carl took a small statue out of his inventory. It wasn't really intended as a healing totem. It was one of the decorative statues that the sculptors had been making as home decor. But it would do the job even if it was shaped like a 10-centimeter tall dwarf. It had a large base on it, so it wasn't easily knocked over, and Carl needed every part of that to carve the healing totem spell on. He only empowered it to the royal rank, enough for common issues, and then looked for somewhere to put it. The old wooden building that had been at the gate when he was first here was long vanished. But the stone guard barracks inside the wall were still present, and in use. I need you to place this somewhere near the gate, so the effect spreads past the doors to reach travelers as they're being questioned. Carl informed the gathered guards, who were all intently watching him work. What does it do? The swamp troll asked. It's a healing totem. It cures basic diseases and heals injuries. The troll nodded, and then took the statue in his thick fingers. A tendril of mud extended out, and the statue was placed through a hole above the portcullis. We don't use the murder holes often. It will be good there, the troll explained. Even if they were using the hole, there was a small room up there, and the statue could remain until they were under siege and didn't want to heal the enemy troops at the gate. So people just need to walk out and then back in to heal? One of the wrath demons asked. They just have to stand nearby. I am planning to put more of them at the water fountains. The demon tapped his horn with a claw as he thought. Yeah, that's a good spot. Put them at the big house too. Everyone goes to the boss when there are problems. Carl nodded. That won't be a problem. I will make sure that there are enough spots to go and heal. If my memory is right, the taverns and the market are both near fountains, and that's where most fights and challenges happen, so you can heal right up after. In case you need a rematch or want to do a best 2 of 3. Then at the big house, so that you go to see the boss looking and feeling your best. The orcs and wrath demons laughed. Best 2 of 3 format bar fights was an absolutely brilliant idea. Perhaps these strange foreigners weren't so bad after all. The guards whistled again, and more men came out of the barracks and the closer portions of the city to be informed of the changes by the guards on gate duty. Well, some of the details. Fresh water at all the fountains and the big foreigner taking his wife to make healing spots around the city, so they could fight multiple rounds in the same day were the only parts that the guards actually remembered. Carl was beginning to wonder if their intelligence had devolved with their cultural level. Chapter 1178. Can't leave the house empty. Carl took Dana to the guild house first, where he created a low stone wall outside the barrier all around the property, as the old one had disintegrated centuries ago, and was currently just a rubble pile in a few spots. Then, he used royal rank nature stones to make healing totems at all 4 corners of the property, with the gems buried deep in the wall using earth manipulation. You should add gargoyles. Oh, and a maid. Orthos would like a maid. We have plenty of stones from the clothing sales. Tian suggested. The little fox wasn't wrong. They had hundreds of overlord rank and higher elemental stones available, and even more if they opened a portal so they could access the guild bank. You look like you're talking to someone, Dana asked. Tian thinks that we should leave some staff members at the guild house for orthos. Perhaps an illusionary cleaning staff and some gargoyles. Dana smiled. What about an upgraded spell? You have a skill that's letting you blend other skills to make some of the strange abilities that your team has, right? What if I give you Greater Golem? Could you make better staff members? Carl smiled. I think that I could. Greater Golems and Gargoyles should make Greater Gargoyles if my guess is right. And the original Gargoyles are already pretty good. Dana handed him a skill book with a smile, and in his mind, Tian laughed. Ray will be so excited about those. He cheered. Carl focused on trying to combine Greater Golem and Gargoyle, but the result was not what he expected. Instead of Greater Gargoyle, he got Epic Golem. Champion Carl offers knowledge skill Epic Golem will be transferred to his lovely Dana Mage. That's not what I expected. What does it even summon? Dana asked. I have absolutely no idea, Carl replied with a shrug. We probably shouldn't test this within the city. Dana realized. Yeah, that's the smart move. I will put gargoyles in the guild house and an illusionary staff member spell. Orthos will know how to properly operate them. Carl agreed. Gargoyles took some time to engrave into the backside of the new wall, but the solid illusion was created by Opal in a matter of seconds. She had all those slices of low-grade illusion stone, and if they were just making maids, they didn't need to be powerful. Just a bunch of ascended rank bunnies in maid dresses would be enough to keep the house in working order and the guests entertained. Nobody didn't like bunnies. Carl laughed as he made them a bunch of cleaning rings so that they could more effectively maintain the house, and then gave them their first orders to keep the place clean and host authorized guests, or inform the gargoyles of unauthorized ones. Bunnies? Dana asked as the new staff ran into the house to get to work. Opal made them. Everyone likes bunnies. Carl explained with a smirk. Yes, that is part of the problem. You know how Orthos feels about strangers with muddy feet in his space. Dana reminded him. Kara had told everyone the story of the first time that she had been in a beast god temple, in a way that made her seem innocent naturally, and certainly not like she had tracked muddy footprints across the roof just to see if they would chase her. Kara nodded in agreement, while laying on her back in the Lich Lord's sarcophagus, which was now loaded with gold coins to make the interior into a badger-shaped recliner. The gargoyles were active now, looking like traditional gargoyles, and Carl decided to call the guild house finished. It had healing, guards, and cleaners. Orthos could take care of the rest. With the guild house finished, they moved on to the nearest fountain. They were slowly gathering spectators as they walked, due mostly to the quality of the outfits that they were wearing. It wasn't their fanciest, but it was still more than enough to stand out. Coupled with the obvious power level of the pair of strangers and all the changes made to the city, the residents of Banga had questions that needed answers. Sir, might I ask, do you know what is happening in the city? So many new buildings went up. Now there are fountains and fresh clean water, and new guards scaring the children. An old dragonkin woman pleaded. It's not that scary. The guards are just there to keep everyone safe. They will help stop thefts, catch criminals, and stop unwanted violence. Carl offered. Who would want violence? No, you mean fights between demons and orcs, right? Those are against clan rules. The old woman replied. Carl nodded. But the guards will only stop them if they are going to break something. If they both want to fight, the new guards will let them. They are a relic of the last system resurgence, brought back to enforce city rules. The ancient city lord has returned, and he is starting to bring all the functions of the city back online. The old woman smiled. So, the system is real? Dana smiled and patted the woman on the shoulder. Indeed it is. Soon the young ones will start awakening system classes, and the city will return to the state it was in during its peak. What is it you're doing now? Your friend is doing something to the fountain. But we already checked. It's clean water. The old woman asked Dana as Carl got to work. He's got a rare skill. He's going to create a healing effect around the fountain, so that everyone who comes to get water is also healed of injuries and illnesses. If everyone comes by every few days, their health will constantly get better. Once he finishes this one, we will go to the other ones in the city. Dana explained. The old dragonkin woman seemed completely unconvinced by Dana's words until the first pulse of the spell covered the area, and she gasped, then shifted her weight and shook her leg. The knee pain faded. It's really gone, she mumbled. See, just keep standing here. The pulses are some time apart, but just standing near the fountain for a while should have you feeling better in no time. Now, it's time for us to head out and do the other fountains so that everyone can get the benefit. Dana informed her with a wave, before rejoining Carl to walk through the stunned crowd of onlookers. Chapter 1179, Healing Waters. The last of the fountains for them to upgrade was the one at the newly rebuilt City Hall. where a large crowd had gathered. Whether they were waiting for news, or just enjoying the water park in the gardens was anyone's guess. But nobody tried to stop Carl as he went for the main fountain to start the upgrades. There were thousands of people gathered in the park, and the first pulse of the spell was a visible change rippling through the crowd. Good work. But if that fountain didn't circulate and filter the water, it would have been absolutely disgusting by now. Dana chuckled as Carl came down from the fountain, as he had been riding near the top, where it wouldn't be easily reached. Well, now there is no real excuse for the city's residents not to be clean. I am sure that orthos will institute public baths soon enough. They used to be a thing here, but I didn't see any new buildings that might be them. He's got enough to do for one day, though, Carl agreed. I can still hear him and the clan chief arguing in the office upstairs. Why don't we head to the guild house for the night, and then we can talk to him in the morning when he's gotten things sorted out here? Dana suggested. Carl wrapped an arm around her shoulders and was about to lead her back when the dragon in question and the clan chief came out to the podium on the front steps of City Hall. Come up to the stage so we can tell everyone at once what is going on. Orthos messaged them both. Reluctantly, Carl and Dana joined the two city leaders on the stage, while the clan chief poked at the microphone, trying to figure out what it was and what it did. Orthos smiled and activated the device with a bit of mana, then motioned for the chief to speak. My beloved family of the Banga clan. The chief paused as his magically enhanced voice boomed over the concourse. Today is a glorious day for the Banga clan. Our city lord has returned, and the ancient ways have begun to restore themselves with his help. You must have all seen the fresh water in the fountains or felt the healing. These will remain as long as our city lord remains in Banga. The new guards are here to help bring the Banga clan back to its glory days. They will not harm anyone but criminals. I have spoken with the city lord, and none of the Banga clan's rules go against the ancient laws. He paused as the crowd cheered, and then raised his hand for silence. That said, there will be a few changes. The old laws only allow indentured servitude for debts. So, our lowest-ranked clan members will have their status adjusted. Functionally, little will change, but they will be free to work for any member of the clan. There were some cheers and a few roars of outrage at that news, but the clan chief wasn't finished. Only by following the old laws can we bring back the system. The city lord has proven this to me, and granted me the power to cleave apart our enemies, which has awakened the system in Banga clan's territory. I can see it, use it, and learn the powers of a true warrior. The clan chief finished. The crowd hooped and cheered in satisfaction, while Carl and Dana did their best not to laugh at the fact that Orthos had finally made the clan chief agree by giving him the most basic of basic warrior class skill books. The clan chief stepped back, and Orthos took his place at the podium. Greetings, everyone. I am City Lord Orthos, returned now that the city stones are back online. I know that this will be a big change for everyone, but I can assure you that it is all for the betterment of the Banga clan. There have been a few new buildings constructed already, including the fountain network, which I see many are enjoying. But there will be more of them added soon. Public baths, upgraded smoke houses, and storage buildings to keep food fresh longer. Also, there will be upgrades to the city's defenses, so that the Banga clan will not need to fear invasion, even by feral dragons. Orthos explained. That was the sort of news that generations of the local residents had been waiting to hear. Safety within the city was never guaranteed, but if they could eliminate the threat of invasion and just keep it to local crime, then the lowest-ranking clan members saw a real chance to maybe earn enough to upgrade their living conditions. Of course, they had no idea that Orthos was planning that already, as he was deeply disgusted by the decay in his city's infrastructure. But for the moment, his words were a shining beacon of hope. Orthos smiled at the cheering crowd as he continued. These two fine visitors, members of my guild, have placed healing magic on all of the fountains in town, including the water park at the fountain here at City Hall. If a member of your family falls ill or is injured, the first place you should take them is to one of the fountains. Half an hour there will cure most illnesses and injuries. If they have broken bones, set them straight first so they don't heal improperly. The hope is that we can lessen the burden on the midwives and healers in the city, and prevent the spread of plagues through the clan. Orthos stepped back while Carl and Dana waved at the crowd, and the orcs began setting up grills. It wasn't a proper party without something on the grill. Carl patted the clan chief on the shoulder. Good work. It looks like your people are going to adjust quickly to the changes City Lord Orthos needs to make to bring Banga back up to his standards. The clan chief grumbled in annoyance, then nodded. Yes, it is all good news. Just hard to accept that things can change so quickly and easily when I couldn't make any of those changes myself. So that's what the problem was. Chapter 1180. Banga Party. Now that there was a properly Orcish party going on in the City Hall gardens, Carl knew that they weren't going to get back to the guild house to sleep anytime soon, so he led Dana over to where a group of demon women were setting up drums and cleaning wooden flutes. Oh, welcome. I don't know what to call you, and it seems rude to call you by name. The demoness closest to them giggled. You can use our names, we don't mind, or pick a title you like. We've got some time before the food, so we thought that we might dance. I'm eager to find out what Banga clan's musical taste is like. Carl replied. Dana nodded in agreement. If we stand too far away, it's hard to sort it all out. My ears are sensitive, and there are many people singing and playing. In that case, let's start with some classics for the visitors. The singer declared as the rest of the group finished setting up. The drums started a fast and cheerful beat. Then the flutes joined in, and the singer began a wordless animalistic cry that the nearby revelers joined in, and then began to bounce in spot. It's a mosh pit, Dana realized with a laugh. She was right, it was not some sort of organized formal dance, it was an ancient dance tune that they had forgotten the words to, and now just mimicked with a wordless chanting. So, Carl pulled Dana into the crowd to join the dancing, which was spreading further and further from the initial group as more musicians joined in on the song. Then, a deep roaring voice joined in, and Carl realized that the reason nobody remembered the words was because the song was originally in Dragon, and nobody here spoke the language, they just liked the song. Orthos had transformed, and he was singing along with the music, which turned out to be a children's tune about flying, and the rhythmic thumping of the drums was intended to teach them the proper beat to flap their wings. Somehow, that made it even funnier, and Carl sang along as they danced through the crowd until a great cheer from one side of the park brought the dance to an end. The food was ready, and the people of Banga were ready to properly welcome their city lord home. Welcome, visitor. Did you have a preference? We've got many meats roasting. The orc slicing up servings of food declared. Something herb-seasoned, I think. Carl decided. Same. Dana agreed. In that case, we have just the right thing for you. It's a river fish that goes well with the dried herbs and fresh lemon. He declared, then handed them each a plate with a small fish and some sort of purple roast potato on it. Cheers. Actually, do you have more grill space? I have a donation that I'm sure the orcs will like. Carl suggested. Hawk nodded in agreement. He had many things that the orcs liked, but he had far too many crocolisks and crabs. Both were excellent, but he may have, just possibly, went overboard while collecting them. Hawk pointed to an overlord-ranked crocolisk, and Carl prepared to pull it out when the orc nodded. There is a roasting pit just behind me. How big is your donation? The cook replied. I was going to give you a whole crocolisk. I stored it without portioning it, and it's too much. Carl explained. The orc's eyes lit up. I haven't had crocolisk forever. They live to the south in the swamps, but we don't go there often, the Naga tribes are territorial. Carl found an open spot near the roasting pits and dropped the crocolisk on the ground for the cooks to prepare. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. It might take some time to fully roast, but it's a lot of meat. The orcs cheered and pulled him into careful hugs so they didn't spill his plate. You're pretty decent for an outsider. Don't worry, we can slice strips as it cooks, so there will be crocolisk all night long. You're new to Banga, but this party will probably last for at least 2 days. So just go to wherever you're staying and sleep when you need. The cook explained. An old troll with white hair and wrinkled blue skin laughed. With a new wife, it can be hard to get out of bed, but the party will be here waiting for you until we run out of food and drink. Carl waved goodbye as he followed Dana to the base of a tree to sit and eat, out of the way of the dancers. Every so often, someone would stagger across the park, either limping or staggering drunk, and splash into the pool by the main fountain. They would stay there for a few minutes, letting the healing totem work, and then rejoin the party refreshed and good to go. Maybe the healing pools were a bad idea. If they can just heal their sore feet, the demons and orcs will never stop dancing. Dana laughed as she realized what was happening. They said they'd quit when they ran out of food that had been prepared for the party, and the orcs aren't known for being wasteful. I'm sure that it will be fine eventually. Plus, look how happy all the kids are with the new water park. Carl joked. The kiddie pool had been repurposed for a preteen wrestling tournament, where the orcs and demons could show off for each other. The matches were currently being dominated by a wrath demon girl with oversized leathery wings and alabaster pale skin. Despite being one of the smaller contestants, she had immense physical strength and had managed to body slam an orcish boy twice her size to eliminate him. The boy didn't look happy about it, but the rest of the contestants were cheering her on as the next little boy came up to challenge her leadership. It reminded Carl of the wrath demons in Drad when he had first brought them the fertility charms. The female of the group were definitely not any physically weaker than their male counterparts. Chapter 1181. Can gargoyles get bored? Late into the night, Carl and Dana returned to the Banga guild house, where the gargoyles and the bunny maids welcomed them back with enthusiasm. Carl got the impression that they were bored without guests. He wasn't sure if a gargoyle could actually get bored, but he'd never put one anywhere that didn't get frequent traffic. Even the ones in the Alliance house had rapidly spread to the whole house from the basement, and they had Lotus and the Lala bunnies to keep them constant company. Or Thor. They loved to pile on the behemoth when he was relaxing on the sofa. While the gargoyles just seemed like they had been bored, Carl got the impression that the bunnies viewed this level of even temporary isolation as a form of sensory deprivation torture on the level of locking Lotus in a concrete room with no windows. They even went so far as to put the sheets by the fireplace to warm, so that Carl and Dana didn't get into a cold bed on a cool night. Not that it would have mattered, as both of them were in fully furred forms at the moment. But it was the thought that counted. You're going to need to gather guild members to the guild house, or at least a few clerics or something. The staff is lonely. Carl warned Orthos before taking Dana to bed. Why did you make staff that needs constant companionship? The bronze dragon replied. They're cute. Carl could almost hear the dragon sigh as he received that message, but a few seconds later he responded. I will arrange for a few of the Beast God Temple's faithful to come and repopulate this branch of the Darklight host. The residents of Banga are not yet suitable. Perhaps in the next generation they will be. But not now. That was good enough for Carl. They had started to bring the system back online on this continent, and that was one step closer to finding out why it wasn't working properly. The theory that it was someone from the immortal realm who didn't know about the system seemed to be the most likely scenario. But until they actually found the source, Carl wouldn't rule anything out, including that it was the giants starting shit again. They had been a giant pain in his ass all through the early ranks in the Golden Dragon Nation, and he knew that their Titan God clerics had been working since before recorded history to deactivate the system, or at least keep it for themselves. Logically, it might also be both. An immortal rank giant. That wasn't something that Carl could deal with, even with the multitude of tricks that he had at his disposal. But if an immortal giant did try to enter this world, it would alert Matilda immediately, and she could take care of it. That brought up another thought. Had the old Chaos Dragon sent them here as bait? If they were bait, there was a greater than zero chance that Kara would get to punch someone in the face, and that was more than enough reason for the Badger and Dragon to coordinate to arrange the whole trip. Kara was conveniently napping, so he couldn't get her reaction to that thought, but Hawk wouldn't put it past them. Tion was sure that his sister wouldn't lie to them. But if you never asked, did it really count as lying? Kara would be happy to tell them if being bait to pick a fight was her plan from the start. You just needed to ask her. Carl wrapped his arms around Dana and settled in for the night with troubled thoughts on his mind. Unfortunately, they weren't gone when he woke up to the mental equivalent of a poke to the face from Orthos. What is so important that you woke me up? Carl asked. Get ready for battle. There is a hostile clan coming for Banga. The city belongs to the Darklight host, So it's your job to defend the city too. We've got incoming feral dragons with a dragonkin death cult. Orthos explained. Carl nudged Hawk and Kara awake, then gave Dana a gentle shake. Dana? There is an attack on the city. We need to keep them from destroying everything that Orthos just built. Carl whispered. She was in fox form, she would hear him. It took a second to get moving, but then Carl scanned the horizon outside the window and saw the incoming hostile tribe, which was already attacking the farmers outside of town as the non-combatants ran for safety in the city walls. What's the plan? Dana asked. I will transform. You ride on my back. Hawk and Kara will work together, while Tion and Opal will provide support for the ground troops from inside their spaces. Neither of them likes to come out during battle. Carl explained. Then he jumped out the window and activated Avatar, along with a full set of buffs over the group. Orthos joined them in the sky as Hawk appeared in the air by Carl's side, with Kara riding on his back. The bird immediately gained altitude, racing upward like a shooting star in reverse. That hawk of yours is insanely fast. Orthos commended. He shouldn't have too many troubles dealing with rogue dragons. I hope. What do we have? Have you gotten a report yet? Carl asked. One rogue sand dragon matriarch and her clutch. I'm afraid that we will have to let you deal with the matriarch today. She's near the peak of totem rank, so you've got the best chance of settling her aggression before the city is damaged. You don't need to kill her if she wants to run away. Once the cult is gone and the spell they've cast over the dragons fades, their aggression will fade as well. Well, that was interesting. Perhaps the dragons weren't all going feral on their own. If there were dragonkin cults casting spells to make them more aggressive, the problem might be more easily solved than expected. After all, they had a Kara. Chapter 1182. Sand Dragons. With Dana settled in on his back and held in place by eternal lightning, Carl flew out to intercept the matriarch, while Orthos went to join Banga's ground troops, and Hawk vanished into the clouds. Don't you think that you've gotten too much altitude? Carl asked as the bird vanished from sight. We have a plan, Hawk assured him. As long as he wasn't distracted, it should be fine. The matriarch roared when she saw Carl's massive form, large even for a mythic rank dragon, thanks to his buffs. That was a threat that she couldn't ignore, and when Carl moved the fight away from the infantry, the matriarch followed. Even if they were thousands of meters in the air, the aftermath of their battle was likely to cause wide-scale destruction. It was simply inevitable during a battle between totem-rank dragons. Drop me off here. I will ride with Orthos to deal with the ground forces. I want to know what epic golems do, and I won't be able to use them from 2 kilometers in the air. Dana instructed. Carl chuckled. Go ahead. I will inform Orthos that you intend to ride him into battle. Kara laughed in Carl's mind. Yes, let the Dana mage ride the stuffy dragon. It would do him good. Dana flew down to where Orthos had circled back to collect her, as her own flight was not fast enough to get her to the battle on time. I will not forget this. I am not a horse. Or a sarrow. Orthos warned Carl. I can have her make an oversized lance if it helps. The old cleric gave Carl a slight draconic smile. The children of the city would tell stories of this battle for a century if she did. But it was purely excessive to use a lance when you were riding a dragon. Carl and the matriarch circled each other as they ascended, looking for an opening in their enemy's guard. The sand dragon had a barrier of swirling sand around her body that should equal eternal lightning in effectiveness, or something close to it. That would not make this an easy fight for either side. Sand vortexes appeared in the air all over their portion of the battlefield, and Carl countered with dozens of hellstorm vortexes. The combination turned the battlefield into an obstacle course, where both had to weave around the swirling winds to avoid having their wings shredded. It was standard for dragons at their level, Orthos knew. But he didn't have an opportunity to warn Carl about the most common battle tactics the matriarch would likely employ. Carl sent out a barrage of disintegration attacks, which the sand dragon countered with fireballs, causing explosions of black fire to pepper the sky like anti-aircraft flak. The 2 dragons crashed together, snapping and snarling as they clawed at each other before twisting free to make another pass. Neither barrier fell in the first exchange, but Carl knew that his strength was buffed to a level much higher than what the sand dragon could claim. It was unlikely to go for another direct confrontation now that it knew it was physically outmatched. But the real battle was not between the two champions. From 10,000 meters in the air, Hawk and Kara put their plan into action. Hawk twisted and flapped once, hard. He rocketed toward the ground at nearly 600 kilometers an hour, and then at 3,000 meters out, he flared his wings and activated Lord of Destruction, turning himself incorporeal. While Hawk rapidly decelerated, Kara did not. A small black and white fur missile hurtled toward the back of an overlord-ranked sand dragon, who hadn't even noticed the incoming threat. With disintegration, as a protective shell outside of eternal lightning, she prepared a void blast in front of herself. Kara hit the dragon's back like a 30-kilo cannonball, and then void blast exploded on contact, evaporating a large portion of the beast's body and letting Kara hurtle past him toward the ground without slowing. Badger incoming! She cheered as she realized that she was headed for a totem-ranked dragonkin warrior. The wind was knocked from her as she slammed into the man's hastily raised shield, but the satisfying sound of shattered bones let her know that her disintegration barrier hadn't been wasted. The dragonkin cult members began to panic as a blur of teeth and claws tore apart one of their champions, then launched itself at the unfortunate black dragon cleric who happened to be closest to the dead warrior. Satisfying. Hawk laughed as he rained ghostfire meteors on the battlefield. From Ortho's back, Dana shook her head at the duo's antics. She hadn't expected any less from them when Hawk had vanished into the clouds. The sand dragons had scattered to avoid the meteor bombardment, and Orthos was about to chase them with Dana on his back. Just let Hawk and Kara deal with the dragons. They're both faster flyers than we are, she suggested. Orthos nodded and landed at the edge of the battlefield to let Dana disembark and join the ground fight. After millennia of training magical beasts, Orthos was an exceptional ground combatant. Most species couldn't fly, and part of his job as an elder of the Beast God Temple was to teach them to fight. They might not be dragons, but four-legged combat was similar for most species. Dana focused on Epic Golem, then frowned when she got a system menu and not a guardian. Please select form before each activation. Ogre King, Naga King, Naga Shaman, Earth Elemental Champion. Each listing was a dungeon boss that she had faced in the past. In this case, she went with the Earth Elemental Champion, a 10-meter-tall Titan-sized beast with incredibly high durability and damage reduction. But more importantly, it could reshape its stone club into a massive stone blade, which gave it access to auto-parry. Or they could reshape their weapons as golem duplication gave her two of them. She might have just found a new favorite spell. Chapter 1183. They've got your back. The rest of the golems joined the pair of epic golems, while the epic guard remained back to protect Dana from anything that might make it close enough to threaten her from behind. For golems and a pair of Earth Elemental champions at the Overlord rank would make her a priority target among the Banga defense force very quickly, assuming that the enemy understood what was happening. Fortunately, she had the orcs on her side, and even without a system interface, they hadn't had any problems reaching higher ranks through pure dedication. They were happy to have a proper fight, but it was even better when they got comedy with it. The Earth Elemental champions weren't actually very agile, so auto-parry was only minimally effective. But one of them had just parried a fireball from a flying dragon, making it explode in the air overhead. That made the big guys a whole city worth of new friends in one fight. If Ray was here, she could create a whole army of undead. But Dana was satisfied with the force that she had managed to create. The golems served as the vanguard of the Banga City counterattack, driving deep into the enemy lines and allowing the defenders to push in behind them and get at the juicy meat. Also known as the clerics and shamans that the enemy had tried to protect in the middle of their formation. Hawk was fully engaged in a dogfight with a pair of sand dragons, but Dana couldn't see Kara. She didn't realize that the Chaos Badger had never left the ground again after she had landed, or that she was most of the reason that the golems were able to advance so quickly. Kara was in heaven today. None of the armor on the Dragonkin soldiers was bonded. That meant that it was all up for grabs, She just had to remove the armor from the enemy before someone wrecked it. Or remove the enemy from inside the armor with disintegrate. That worked too. The sight of Kara's looting methods had absolutely terrified the enemy army, and it was already clear that the ones closest to Kara desperately wanted to retreat. But the forces behind them hadn't realized the problem yet, and they were trapped. Worse, they couldn't even attack her properly because she kept retreating between the golem's feet so that the constructs would parry the attacks intended for her. The dragonkin weren't sure if it was possible for a badger to smirk, but they were pretty sure that they had just seen it. Karl and the sand dragon exchanged spells and dodged vortexes in a complex aerial dance, each trying to get the upper hand, but both wary of what the other might be holding in reserve. Then the matriarch suddenly broke off and abandoned the cause, taking her surviving whelps with her. By the time that Karl realized she wasn't just circling for another attack, she was far off in the distance to the east, and Hawk was asking whether he should follow them. Let them go. I don't think that they'll be in any hurry to come back to Banga. Help with the ground assault so that the city doesn't lose too many warriors. Karl instructed. That didn't look like it was going to be a huge issue, as the Banga city residents outnumbered the attackers by quite a large margin. Without their dragons, the cult didn't stand a chance. Hey boss, did you know these guys aren't local? They don't smell like this continent. Kara welcomed Karl as he landed at the edge of the battle. The Chaos Badger had created a mound of corpses, and was currently using it to play a macabre game of King of the Hill, so she could look down at her enemies. Sister Ray taught her the technique, and it really was fun. The remaining members of the cult did not show any signs of retreating. No signs of fear at all. No, that wasn't right, Kara decided. They were terrified, but more terrified of what would happen to them if they retreated, so they would fight to the very end and consider dying a victory of its own. That meant she didn't have to worry about being nice to them. Then, Kara remembered that she had forgotten an entire step in her plan. Elemental's Wrath. The sight of the suddenly enlarged and flaming Chaos Badger was the breaking point, even for the heavily brainwashed cultists. They broke and began to flee, but in her transformed state, Kara was much faster than they were, and everything that she touched erupted with elemental flames. Even a simple scratch from her was enough to doom most opponents, and when her claws got into your flesh, you would burn from the inside out. But the enemy cultists weren't the only ones terrified. None of the Banga city defenders dared to come within 20 meters of Kara, so that they weren't mistaken for a cultist and attacked by that blur of fur and flames. Especially the Banga city dragonkin. Karl laughed as the enemy troops began to run right past him to escape from Kara. The Karl isn't even scary enough to stop the stupid ones from fleeing. Hawk laughed. Kara giggled as she gave a dragonkin an atomic wedgie, then threw him on the pile. She didn't even attack him, just pulled his underwear up over his head and threw him with the corpses. If he knew what was good for him, he would stay there until she was done. The fight was almost over anyhow, with the survivors having fled, and the dragons who could actually threaten the city long gone. But it was Kara's assertion that these attackers didn't smell like this continent that stuck in Karl's head. He hadn't been trying to sniff the sand dragon when they were grappling, so he hadn't noticed. But Karl did notice that Kara was still only a little over a meter tall, even when transformed with Elemental's Wrath. That skill should surely cause a more extreme transformation than simply making her into a flaming badger. But with the chaos element on her side, there was nothing saying that the spell couldn't have turned her into a llama or something. Chapter 1184. Follow the Retreat. Kara ended the transformation spell as the last of the enemies left. Berserk was fun. She imagined it was what Sister Ray felt like all the time in combat. But she couldn't be absolutely sure. It definitely made stabbing things feel more satisfying. Orthos transformed back to human as he approached Karl. I think that you and Dana should go follow the retreating attackers. They were not from this place. Everyone born on a world under the influence of the dragon gods has signs of it. They were dragonkin, but not from a world subject to the dragon gods. That most likely means that they're from the immortal realm, but it might be another mortal realm where the old gods are forgotten, and there are no chromatic dragons to remind them. He explained. Will you be all right? Karl asked. The bronze dragon smiled. Of course. First, I will heal many of the most severely wounded, and then the fountains can take care of the rest. I'm not a high priest of the beast gods for nothing. Dana frowned. I've been meaning to ask. How does that even work? Aren't you a cleric of the bronze dragon god by default? Orthos smiled. I am, actually. Think of it as something like dual-classed. You see, I started as a bronze dragon cleric, but when I advanced, I was already working with the beast temples to help civilize their orphans. And I chose an advanced class that made me a high priest of the beast gods as well. Like how you have been a few different kinds of mage at this point. Dana nodded in understanding. That makes sense. It just seemed odd that you had entirely changed pantheons. Orthos shrugged. It wasn't so big of a change. There is a beast god of order, which is similar to the bronze dragon of law. Both of the gods get along well, and there was no resistance to my old skills when I changed. As he talked, Orthos began casting a ritual magic spell that was spreading healing over the battlefield, patching up the wounded in some sort of triage order, as not everyone within the zone was healing at the same time. That should make it a multiple target healing spell, Carl reasoned. Not an area of effect. But the result should be the same. Well, Miss Dana, should we shadow the retreating enemy? If they return to where they entered the continent, or even to an overnight camp, we might be able to learn what Matilda sent us here for. Carl suggested. Dana looked at the horizon, where the sun had only just risen. All right, let's go. We can sleep later. She reluctantly agreed. Hawk and Kara returned to their spaces to wait for the next event. But only a few minutes after they took off, Hawk was out again to scout the area. This was a whole new continent with all new mice. Even if he didn't really care where the dragonkin who attacked the new house's city were going, he might still come across something good. While Hawk might not be headed out for the right reasons, Carl knew that the bird would actually do his job and track the retreating enemy troops. I can't see anything from up here but the scenery. It's nice, really. The mountains to the north. The woods beneath us. Dana muttered as they reached the second hour of soaring in the sky, watching the troops scurry away from the battle. I found it. They're coming from a big mouse tunnel that leads underground. Hawk reported. Carl turned to find the spot that Hawk was talking about, and realized that there was an entire village set up there. They had a dragon breeding facility set up, with hatchling feral dragons being trained as mounts, chained dragons of the lesser species locked in pens, and clutches of eggs under warm lights. They didn't let the dragons guard their eggs, probably to reduce how protective they were of their pens. But that meant that this was more than just a simple cult invasion from another world. They were established, and they were intending to stay here for a long time. In fact, they might be behind many of the reports of feral juvenile dragons that Matilda had mentioned. The real problem was that they had dozens of totem-ranked dragons and dragonkin mages in the camp, and neither Carl nor Dana could transform into a dragonkin to try to infiltrate them. Hey, little help? Just melt these chains and we can all be free. The dragons on the ground were shouting as they saw Carl flying overhead. It's a trap, they're under a mind control barrier. Kara noted. Don't get close. They've stolen my first clutch. A mental voice informed Carl in Draconic. The pure agony of the young dragon's voice was all it took for Carl to make the decision. Hey Kara, wanna play with some dragonkin? You can have everything but the eggs. We'll put those in the tiny world because they'll bond if you bring them in your space. Carl suggested. Tion scoffed as he examined the situation. I can break those chains. They're just overlord-ranked alloy enchanted to bind dragons. I'm the furthest thing from dragons, and even from here, I can shatter the shackles with earth manipulation. Wait until we're close. Hawk, you get the honor of the first pass. Blow Ghostfire into the tunnels and see what pops out of the escape hatches. I will be right behind you to join the attack when Tion pops the shackles. Kara, you find the mages keeping that mind control barrier up. Dana, we're going to attack the camp and jailbreak the dragons. Hold on tight. Carl instructed aloud so she could prepare for the dive. Hawk was a streak of fire as he dove, but he didn't just flame the tunnels, he cast Apocalypse over the dragonkin camp on the surface before sending a stream of flame down the access tunnel to the underground. There was momentary panic, but Carl was approaching, and the mages were shouting for the capture teams to be prepared. Kara laughed as they made it super easy for her to find out who she had to deal with first. It was like a 2-for-1 bonus day. Chapter 1185. Dragons Freed. Dana bombarded the ground with spells, then summoned her golems as Karl approached the ground, giving them someone to fight before Kara arrived. Karl added his, including a full team of spectral knights, adding to the attack force. Then, Tion destroyed all the shackles on the dragons at the same time that Kara stole the barrier orb. Not destroyed. She killed the man holding it, and then tossed it in her space to inspect later. The barrier over the dragon pens collapsed, and the captured dragons cheered in victory before either attacking their captors or grabbing handfuls of eggs from various clutches and flying away. "Thank you, World Dragon. Good luck," the female voice who had warned Karl declared, this time in his ears, not in his mind. It was a young ice dragon, her scales nearly transparent over blue hide, giving her the appearance of thick ice, like what was found in the frost giant nation. Then there was Kara everywhere. Lesser Kara, Greater Kara, Epic Kara, the Chaos Badger cheered. Did she just turn herself into golems? Dana laughed as the whole group exploded with flames. Kara had activated Elemental's Wrath, and the golems gained the skill as well. Karl bit the head off a dragonkin mage, then shook his head. "I don't think that they're actual golems. They're illusions. She's mimicking the golem spell with clones made of pure chaos energy, then transformed into elementals." In her space, Opal nodded in agreement. This was a form of minor illusion. If someone damaged them, they would vanish. The problem was damaging them when they were berserk and had limited invulnerability based on Kara's durability. The Badgers were relentless, tearing through the camp with one destination in mind: the tunnels. "Where did you hide the good loot?" "In your room, of course." There was nothing good in the camp, just a bunch of leftovers that the dragons didn't leave with. So, the good stuff had to be underground and she was going to find it. The real Kara was intently hunting down all the mages who were trying to influence the dragons' minds, killing and looting all the mind control and dragon imprisonment devices that they kept trying to use on Karl, not understanding that he wasn't really a dragon. "It must be the dragon rider. Aim for the rider, and we should be able to recapture the product," one of the dragonkin shouted. Karl smashed him under one massive foot, and Kara used Pilfer to see what he was hiding. She got a single golden key, which wasn't too interesting. But keys led to things that were interesting. The man didn't even realize that he had been robbed before Karl activated Void Blast around his foot and obliterated the leader's body. Soon, there were no other dragons in the fight. They were either dead, or they had fled after the enemies on the surface were all gone. The reinforcements that the dragonkin had been counting on had never arrived, as Hawk was a master at grabbing little rodents who popped their heads out of tunnels. He had flooded every entrance that he could find with Ghostfire, except the one that the Kara clones had entered. "Boss, we found good stuff." "Well, good stuff that you can have. There is a portal stone, and it's got an open portal." Kara updated. "Where does it lead?" "Dunno. Some other world. Not powerful, weaker than the mana here. I sent a few Karas through, and they didn't find anything good. It's just a basement with nothing but a portal and no doors. The mages must enter with magic, then. Tell them to grab the portal stones from both sides and bring them here. I'm not going to transform and clear the tunnels. We will let the golems do it." Karl explained. "Got it. Portal stones incoming." The stones were made of polished obsidian and carved with active runes. Whoever had made these knew the art of runecrafting, but they were set to randomize the destination every time that the spell was activated. So, even if the same spell was used again, it was unlikely that they would end up on this world. "I don't see any more survivors with soul sight," Hawk informed them. "Alright, the golems will try to flush some more from underground. I don't know if there will be any, but we shouldn't leave any of them to try to open a new portal home." Karl agreed. Kara hummed happily as she began to pile eggs into the tiny world. Nobody had claimed these ones, so they were definitely lootable even if they didn't go in the loot pile. The caretakers in the tiny world were thoroughly baffled by the sudden appearance of hundreds of dragon eggs scattered over every part of the tiny world, But the forest dragon was overjoyed when she found some from her own species carefully tucked into the branches of the largest trees in the forest zone. Dana, can you go update the caretakers about the dragon eggs? Kara doesn't speak common. Carl requested. What caretakers? Dana asked. Right. Forgot to mention them. There is a whole group of nature priestesses and druids living in the tiny world, taking care of the plants for Remy's alchemy and the tiny world itself. Kara moved all the dragon eggs into the various environments there for safekeeping. They're bound to be confused, and I didn't want to drop you in the dirt when I moved. Carl explained. He opened the portal, and Dana stepped through to find herself face to face with a tiny cleric with branches in her hair and tears in her eyes. Did you send me siblings? Thank you so much, pretty lady. You must be the Dana mage. Boss Carl told us all about you. Do you know how many of them there are? We're finding dragon eggs everywhere. The tiny woman rambled. Yes, I am Dana. We raided a camp that had imprisoned dragons for breeding purposes. These are the eggs that none of the survivors claimed. I don't know how many of them there are, the Chaos Badger placed them all. But might I ask who you are? Dana replied. Oh, you can call me Button. I'm a forest dragon nature priestess. That part was self-explanatory. The introduction alone was enough to tell Dana that this was a nature priestess. But a forest dragon? When did they get a forest dragon? And she was very close to the totem rank. The branches were also part of her hair. Chapter 1186. Dragon Eggs and Loot. Dana was about to brush them out when she noticed that the branches were attached to her head, and that the leaves fluttered when she was excited. I don't know if the eggs are all in places that will help them hatch. I will have to ask Carl later. But he wanted me to let you know that there were dragon eggs coming. Dana informed her. Got it. The others are all off on a treasure hunt for dragon eggs now. We will have to send someone underground to find them. And maybe to the library? Do you know what dragons they came from? Button asked. None are chromatic dragons, and they're all near the camps in the various biomes, except for the ones in the mountain city, which are in the park on a pile of gems. Carl informed Dana with a system message. Dana hugged the tiny dragon. They're all near the camps, but there are some in the underground city. I'm sure you know where that is by now. Dana didn't. She hadn't been here since it was renovated, and the tiny world was much larger than she remembered. How many of you are there? She asked as she followed the little dragon. About 100 in total. Not all dragons. Mostly beastkin with some elves and such. My sister is around here somewhere. Likely in the swamp. She likes the humidity. Button explained. She had led Dana to the shore of the lake, near a campsite which had a pair of elves and a dragonkin woman fussing over a pile of mottled blue eggs. Oh, you wanted to examine the eggs? Dana realized. Button looked confused. No, they'll take care of it. Let's go swimming. I made the cutest swimming suit the other day. Do you have one with you? If not, it's all girls here, no need to be shy about skinny dipping. Nobody else ever wears swimsuits, no matter how cute they are, she explained. Dana sighed. Perhaps a sense of urgency simply wasn't part of the mental programming of nature priestesses. This one seemed even less concerned about timelines than Lotus. Carl, I'm going for a swim with Button. Then I will meet with the rest of the caretakers. Do you have everything handled there? She asked. Yeah, we're good. They've cleared the underground. It was just an old den they expanded. Only a few side tunnels, and they're all empty now. Enjoy your swim. I will come join you tonight if you're not busy. Dana laughed. If the others were just as flaky as Lotus and Button, she would likely be in the middle of a cuddle pile with snacks by dark. All right, we've got the rest of the day to play, Dana informed the young dragon. Winning. The others always want to do chores and responsible stuff. While Dana and Button played in the lake, Carl spent a few minutes focusing on the effect that was suppressing the use of magic on this continent. The effect was subtle if you could already use magic, but it would effectively limit the growth of anyone here. Only a few minutes of focus gave him a general direction, and Carl spread the wings of his dragon form to head toward the strongest point. It would be hard to tell how far he had to go until he was there, as he didn't know how strong the effect should be at its core. But the further he flew, the more obvious it was that heading northeast toward Glatt was the right choice. Then Carl got a brilliant idea. He had been to Glatt before, though it had objectively been a very long time. But that didn't mean he couldn't open a portal there now. He still had a good enough sense of spatial awareness for that. A thought was enough to open the portal 1,000 meters above the trees of the elven village of Glatt. But it was nothing like what Carl remembered. The massive trees were gone. The elven city made of tree forts and suspended bridges was no more. Instead, it was a mangled battlefield slowly regrowing around the shattered stumps of the formerly mighty forest. There were still thousands of elves present, huddled in tents and looking dejected. Not so much a village anymore, but a refugee camp. Carl landed at the edge of the camp and noticed that not one of the people got up to defend against or greet him. They just sat there, awaiting their fate. This time he returned to his natural form, the version of him that they would have seen the first time. Just in case one of the long-lived species remembered him. Carl didn't actually know how long elves lived, but there was a forest dragon here before, and she might remember him. "Is this Glatt?" Carl asked an elderly woman as he reached the camp. "Glatt? Glatt hasn't existed for 100 years. But yes, I suppose that you should be close to where it once was." The elderly elf agreed. "Can you tell me what happened to it? Or were you not from the area?" Carl tried. The old woman sighed and gestured for him to sit. Carl took out a bag of trail mix from Thor's space, as the elves were vegan, and most of the baked goods he had contained either eggs or milk. Usually both, plus sugar, as Lotus made them. The other elves cast longing glances at the small bag of food, and Carl realized that things were worse here than they had looked. Kara gave him a mental nudge. "There are bags of rice and beans in Thor's space. Tessa makes them in advance, and he holds on to them for her. Not just a few bags, either. There were literal tons of rice and beans stored in Thor's space for some emergency that may or may not ever happen." Carl took out 2 30-kilo sacks of the ubiquitous cleric food, and nodded for the refugees to come get them. He could help at least this much. Chapter 1187. Send them to her. "Do you have cooking utensils? If not, I can make some for you," Carl offered. The elves looked around the camp, then frowned. "None big enough to cook for everyone." Carl smiled and let Tion use earth manipulation to make a pair of giant metal pots. "Those should be suitable. Here, take this ring as well, it makes water. You can use mana, right?" The old man who had come to get the bags winked at Carl. "We might be in bad shape, but we're still elves. I can use enough magic to make water to boil rice. But the giants killed all our actual mages and clerics, so we don't have anyone who can make food. With the forest destroyed, it's been hard to find anything at all." The old woman sighed and nodded. Just over 1,000 years ago, the Titan gods declared a holy war on the continent. With their immortal lords suppressing the mana on the planet, we couldn't even fight back. They started in the middle of the continent, somewhere near Sallow Lake. That wasn't giant territory before the war. I don't know where they came from. But as the war started, it became harder for our mages to use grand magics every day. It took them 100 years to make their way across the continent, and the old civilizations collapsed under their relentless assaults. Then they retreated to the lake and made the center of the continent into their new nation. But they still send armies around the continent, looking for anyone trying to repair what they broke. They steal people sometimes, but I'm told that there are no slaves in the giant cities, so they're probably eating them. Savages, they are. But what brings you here? Carl patted her on the shoulder. Supreme Lady Matilda, the Chaos Dragon Elder of the Darklight Host, asked me to come here and find out what was messing with the continent's access to the system. We have found that it's mostly just magic that is restricted, as we managed to restore system access to a few warriors. Once I find the source of the problem, I will either fix it or call the Supreme Lady to deal with it for me. The ancient chaos troubled herself over us? A middle-aged elf asked. Carl nodded. She is awake again, and your situation intrigued her because it's not right. Anything not right and not influenced by chaos is new and interesting to her. So, she sent me to go deal with it, while she takes care of her usual tasks in the Dragon Isles. The elderly elf sitting next to Carl smiled. Is she actually doing something? Carl patted her on the shoulder. It doesn't look like it, but she prevents all the attempts by the immortal realm to enter this world and claim the people as slaves. I suspect that the Titans came from another mortal realm world, and that's why she didn't catch it before there were too many of them here for the people to handle. 1,000 years ago, she was mostly sleeping through the downturn in the world's magic, not paying close attention to everything that happened around the world. The elf got a nostalgic look on her face. I don't suppose that you could send us to her? The Chaos Dragon has always been a friend of the elves in our times of need, she asked. Carl smiled. I don't see why not. Join the others and have dinner, and then I will send you all to her hometown, so you can go petition to speak to her directly. Do Chaos Dragons eat elves? Hawk asked, confused about what she would want with a bunch of people with no power. No, but they live for a very long time, so she can talk to them long enough for them to start understanding things. Kara explained. Hawk stopped caring about the conversation at that point. He had known Thor almost all his life, and he still didn't understand him any better. It must be a chaos thing that he didn't have an affinity for. Kara thought about pointing out that Hawk struggled to even remember important people's names, but that just felt mean. Unlike all of the others, the windspeed hawk species was not known for its keen intellect. It was an absolutely lethal hunting bird at the common rank, but even the lightning sparrow were known to be much more clever, and able to employ complex defensive tactics to ward off predators. Even after all this evolution, Hawk's thought process was still somewhat simple. Far beyond what anyone would expect, but very single-minded and focused, not horribly innovative except when it came to fire magic. Perhaps learning mystic cooking would be good for him, as it encouraged developing new mixtures of ingredients to improve food. The elves used their innate nature magic to help cook the food faster, and probably improve the taste with limited ingredients, which had them all eating less than 30 minutes later. Carl got the impression that they were actually rushing through the meal on the hope that they could finish before he changed his mind and didn't bring them back to Saihosesa. But he could use portals, and it wasn't a big deal to just send them directly to Matilda. Once they were finished, the elves packed up their camp, which looked like they had practiced the process dozens of times before. They had clearly been here for some time, but within 10 minutes, everything was loaded into packs or onto narrow wagons and ready to move on. All right, I will put you near the Supreme Lady. She's a guild member of mine, so I can target her, but I'm not sure where she's standing. Actually, that's probably not a great idea. I haven't been to Saihosesa to drop you there directly, but I can bring you to Drad, on the Dragon Isles, and have one of our members forward you from there. Carl explained. Sending them directly to the Supreme Lady had sounded easy in theory. But once it had occurred to him that she might not be at home, and he might dump the elves on the wrong continent or even in the Chaos Plane, the idea seemed much less appealing. He should probably go visit her in person, in case this happened again. Chapter 1188, Resistance to Magic. Carl began to cast the portal spell to Drad and was immediately hit with the most intense resistance to magic use that he had ever felt. Kara, a little assistance. The Chaos Badger brought up a nullify bubble around him, suppressing the effect. That let the portal form smoothly, just outside the main gates to Drad. Carl waved to the city guards and then tossed them a couple of gold coins. Can you lead these fine guests to the house? I will ask someone to get in contact with the Supreme Lady, as they are requesting a direct meeting. Carl explained. Of course, sir. Ladies, gentlemen, this way, please. We will get you settled in the crafting village for now, as it has lodging for everyone. Carl will have someone here to assist you in just a few minutes. The guard agreed. From outside of Carl's line of sight, a matronly voice replied. No need. I will see them in. Where did you say that they needed to be? Oh, Librarian Sapphire. Yes, that is perfect. Carl is on the other side of the portal, and he says they need to speak directly to the Supreme Lady. Sapphire. Before I run away again, how is the project coming? Carl called. Very well. We've got the inscriptionists from the library here, and they're working overtime on the skills needed for advanced warriors, clerics, and mages. Mage is still a bit spotty, as not every mage is compatible with the advanced spells we have found. But there are also more advanced mage class residents compared to advanced warriors, so they're not our biggest concern. She replied, then frowned. How long will you be gone? We could use your expertise here as well. Carl smiled, though he knew she couldn't see him. Only a few weeks. Once we finish up here, we will be back for the wedding, and then I can help with the projects more frequently. The portal closed immediately after the last of the elves were through, and Sapphire shrugged. Carl must be busy with whatever he was doing there. But on the Nia continent, Carl found himself surrounded by dozens of dragonkin warriors with furious expressions. We finally found you. Return the portal stones, and we might let you have a quick death, the leader of the group demanded. Carl laughed. It won't do you any good. I destroyed the stones on the other side. You're never going home. The dragonkin was about to retort when more portals opened, and 5 totem-rank giants with 4 arms and massive bodies walked through. Well, look what we have here. A little spat between the dragon hunters and the demons, is it? The boss doesn't mind if you don't like each other. You all end up in the same spot anyhow. The giant with the darkest complexion announced, then chuckled grimly. The dragonkin turned to face the giants, while Carl tapped his chin, considering his next move. Before we start the fun part of this, I have a question. Which group is the one suppressing magic on the continent? It's like wearing underwear a size too tight. Very uncomfortable. Carl joked. The dragonkin looked confused, but the giants sneered. Did you think that we would just let the lesser beings use their silly tricks on us? We aren't like you pathetic, short-lived species. We remember. The giant retorted. So it's the followers of the Titan gods. That makes things a bit easier. That still left the question of what the dragonkin that the giants had called the dragon hunters were doing here, and how long they had been operating on the continent. There might have been more slipping through Matilda's protective net than the Chaos Dragon was aware of. Or they might all be from mortal worlds and she simply wasn't concerned about them. More giants came through behind the initial group, but they were all monarchs and overlords, not an immediate concern for Carl. Stay out of our way, and we won't attack you, thief. The leader of the dragonkin whispered. Carl nodded. I don't attack those who don't attack me. It was a nice sentiment. A blatant lie, but a nice sentiment. The leader of the giants equipped a 2-handed maul, letting Carl know that they had some equivalent of an inventory, or perhaps storage devices. If they weren't from this world, they probably didn't have system classes, and Carl didn't see any other signs that they did. Then the giant slammed the ground, and a wave of force raced toward Carl and the dragonkin. A stomp of Carl's foot to activate Gravity Slam caused a collision halfway between them, and threw dirt up in the air, shading the battlefield as Hawk appeared high in the sky, and Kara snuck out of her space to join the fight. She loved picking on big dumb giants. Carl transformed back into the avatar of the World Dragon, and activated all his buffs so he could get the fight really started. The giants began to curse the moment that he transformed, and the totems all abandoned the attack on the dragonkin to target him. Carl called for his golems. First the Epic Guard, then Dire Bears, which duplicated to 4. Then the Epic Golem, which brought up a system message that Carl didn't have time to deal with as he was using Void Blast to parry skills from the giants. Randomize, he thought. Epic Golem selected Myceloid King. 2 towering myceloids appeared in all their fungal glory, and immediately rained spores down on the battlefield as skills crashed into their bodies. Kara laughed as she grabbed one of the spores to stuff up a giant's kilt. Damage reduction doesn't stop them from spreading spores. The badger laughed. But you forgot that you've got the More Golem spell from Dana. She added. Right, Greater Golem. Carl called for the last golems, and for totem-ranked Lightning Sarrow appeared, looking exactly like Thor had before he evolved into a behemoth. Yes, Brother Thor is back. Baby, Kara giggled. That armored head fringe was the perfect spot to hide from retaliation after she stuffed itching spores up the giant's kilts. Carl laughed as a giant roared in frustration at being touched inappropriately by the badger, then summoned the spectral knights. The giants wanted a fight. Now they had one. Chapter 1189. Suppressed Battle. Carl frowned as more thoughts filled his mind, strategizing a defensive perimeter around what the greater golems assumed were the weakest members of the group. Kara and the Epic Guard. Damnable World Dragon. He can still use all his magic, even under suppression. The leader of the giants snarled as he dodged Karl's attempt to bite his face off. It took many times more mana than it should have, and they weren't even at the center of the effect yet. But yes, Karl could still summon golems well enough. However, if he was going to keep spamming Void Blast, he was going to need to supplement his mana supply even with his prodigious mana reserves. Fortunately, the giants were all warriors, so he didn't have to deal with too many complex spell effects, mostly just direct attacks. The golems were doing an excellent job of holding off the rest of the giants, but the constant stream of thought from the greater golems was surprising. Karl didn't even hear the Myceloid King's thoughts, and he knew that they were intelligent, as they were speaking to each other in some language of flashing colors he couldn't decipher. Then it came to him. They were Sero. The Seropaks shared a mental connection. It was an innate ability of the species, and Karl had just never noticed because it was also a skill granted by his class. So, the golems treated him as part of the pack, and the golems were close enough to real Sero that the mental communication worked. Karl did notice that their refreshing lightning was either missing or superseded by eternal lightning, though. He could hear swearing in the distance, but Karl didn't have an opportunity to search for new threats. A crushing blow of the giant's maul narrowly missed as Karl charged, but the giant had 4 arms to grapple with, and only 2 holding the maul. The 2 massive forms were deadlocked for a second. Then Karl breathed ghostfire in the giant's face, forcing him to retreat. Tricky. Using a spell instead of your real breath weapon. The giant snarled. Karl chuckled. You're surprisingly durable. I thought that you'd be a snack by now. His claws sparked against the head of the maul as the giant parried his next attack. The Titan clan does not go down so easily. We are not the discarded dregs of your world. The giant panted. Karl was proving to be incredibly annoying to fight. Not just because he could still use magic, but because it was nearly impossible to damage him, and when you did, he healed so fast you didn't make any headway. The Titan clan healed quickly as well, but against the greater dragon species, they couldn't claim absolute superiority on a physical level. Plus, those shambling mushroom men were turning everything toxic. The angry noises were getting louder, but Karl still couldn't tell where they were coming from. It wasn't any of the 4-armed giants he was fighting, but it sounded too close to be the other giants, who had retreated along with the dragonkin to fight in an area that wasn't covered in spores. Gravity slam on his fist knocked the giant's leader backward, and Karl used the opportunity to assess the battlefield. Over half of the reinforcements were dead, along with almost all of the dragonkin who were trying to flee the battlefield. There were only 2 more of the totem-rank giants standing as well, but he could see that 2 of the down giants were only injured, and would rejoin the battle in a few minutes if they could escape from Kara long enough to heal. The pain screaming was coming from the other side of the portals, as Hawk had cast Apocalypse through them to stop the giants from sending any more forces through. A gurgling moan made Karl instinctively wince in sympathy as one of the fallen giants had his groin crushed by the foot of an overgrown Sero golem. That was enough sign for the survivors that this fight was over. But they couldn't retreat when their village was on fire on the other side. Even if they closed the portals, they couldn't safely retreat. It had been the open portal that had drawn them here, so Karl could just open a new portal to their hometown now that he had marked it with a spell. Or with a curious badger, as Kara had gone through to look around, but quickly came back when she saw that it was all on fire and nobody wanted to fight. Another of the totem-rank giants fell to the combined efforts of the golems and Kara, leaving just 1 unfortunate fighter plus the leader, who was deadlocked with Karl. The leader barked an order, and the overlord-ranked giants at the other side of the battlefield began to retreat, grabbing the bodies of the fallen as they ran for the portals. Good fight. I am sure that I will see you again soon, Karl informed the giant. Don't meddle in things that don't concern you, and we won't have to. The giant replied, nearly shattering eternal lightning with a strike to Karl's shoulder. The suppression effect is causing trouble for others. I can't just let it go, Karl replied, speaking quietly enough that only his opponent would hear. The giant retreated a few steps, then grabbed his last standing ally. Good luck with that. If you find it, I'll pay well for it. Then the leader hurled his partner through the portal and exited the battlefield. The portals closed behind them, and Kara climbed up one of the greater golem's backs to inspect the battlefield without the effort of actually flying. The dragonkin took one look at Karl's group and simply ran away. There was no point in them trying to get their stolen portal stones back from him. He could fight a totem-ranked Titan champion to a standstill, and even when everything else was dead or dying, neither of them had taken any serious damage. That wasn't something that their surviving members could handle. They owed the giants for that one. If they hadn't shown up when they did, the dragonkin would have all died here. Chapter 1190 Source of Suppression. Kara stretched out on the greater golem's back as the summoned Sero pack scoured the area for more threats. Once they were sure that there was nothing else nearby that might be a threat to them, the Sero relaxed and stood around in a circle, waiting for Karl to give instructions. Karl wasn't sure what to do with them. It was getting more and more difficult to use magic as he got closer to the source of the anomaly, but traveling on foot across a continent was simply not an option when they had limited time. The next best option would be to move them to the tiny world so that they didn't have to be dismissed. Then, they could be brought out as needed, and the only risk factor was that someone might notice the entrance and try to force their way into the tiny world. Karl didn't know how likely that was, as he hadn't met anyone else with a similar skill that was active. So, without any evidence that it wasn't relatively safe, that was what Karl went with. He just had to remind the Epic Guard to warn the others that there were golems coming to visit. I am going to fly closer to the source of the suppression and try to find it. Something that the giants said bothers me, though. They wished me good luck, and offered to pay well if I did find the source of the suppression. It might not be in this world anymore, simply link to it to keep the effect active. Karl informed Dana, who was still occupied entertaining Button, and unaware of what was going on outside. Giants? I hope you're not out there causing trouble already? I'm not even done napping on the beach yet. Karl laughed at her annoyed response. No, just a small group that came when I cast a spell. Don't worry too much about it. I will come to you tonight if there isn't a good spot for us both to sleep out here. Karl began following the path of destruction to the east, the most direct route to the strongest point in the suppression. From his vantage point, it looked like the suppression was still coming from the territories of the giant clans, but if the one he had just fought was to be believed, they had lost whatever had caused the effect. How they had managed that was a mystery. But with the decline in power between system resurgences, when the mana was deeper within the planet, they might have thought that it had done its work and placed it somewhere for safekeeping. Then, generations passed and they forgot what it was for. That was usually how lost artifact stories went. You know, this is the same path that we followed to find Kara. Hawk noted. Kara looked around. I remember it looking better than this. I wonder if the orcs are still here. The local tribes were so annoying, always trying to poke me with sticks. They didn't even bring food. This place sucked. The further that Karl flew, the fewer signs of life he found. Not just the sentient species. The ground was dry and barren, and what used to be the grasslands of the Miviascan Empire were turning into cracked earth flats. But Karl saw rain clouds on the horizon, and there were muddy ponds all over the hillsides. So the problem wasn't the rain. Something else was suppressing growth here. At first, it didn't make sense to Karl. But then he began to understand. It wasn't that there was a second negative influence here. It was that the first one was too strong. Whatever was making it difficult to use magic or access, the system had suppressed the mana to such an extreme extent that even the plant life, which normally only needed a bit of vital energy, had begun to die. However, if that were the case, then the lands of the giants, still far to the east, should be completely uninhabitable. Not even animals would survive if the plant life were gone and the suppression effect got any stronger. It didn't seem like the sort of effect that the giants would have wanted for their empire, assuming that they were going to try to take over the continent and suppress the other races. It did them no good if they couldn't thrive themselves. Karl kept flying east until suddenly he felt the imbalance shift. It was now south of him and beginning to subtly fade as he flew away. The center of the effect was not at Sallow Lake, where the giants had made their capital. Instead, it was somewhere in the dead wilderness of what had once been the Miviascan Empire. Soaring on the updrafts caused by hot sun on baked earth, Carl searched for the source of the anomaly. There, far beneath him, there were kilometers of bleached white bones scattered across bare stone. And right in the middle was a portal. No, a dungeon entrance. Immediately, Carl understood what had happened, and why nobody had ever found the source of the suppression effect. Someone had taken it into a dungeon, and then died inside. But the effect was too strong, it didn't remain within the dungeon. It leaked out. And with nobody to control it, the effect was running at full output, unrestrained and without any of the usual guidelines that would be used. Like not suppressing mana so much that it killed the plant life. The question was how Carl was going to deal with it. If he just flew down there without a plan, he would surely become part of the bone pile around the dungeon. He was 5,000 meters in the air, and he could feel the effect trying to leach the mana from his body. If he was under 2,000 meters, he may not be able to resist, as the others had failed to. The bones didn't lie, but even if he could overcome the effect, it was most likely inside the dungeon, and Carl had never heard of anyone entering someone else's dungeon instance. Every group that entered was separated.